Welcome to Night Shift Pulse. Comment your city and the time below. The night connects us all. If you enjoy what you hear, please subscribe. Let's step into the dark. Story 1. The Intake Security Officer and the Extra Wristband. I still remember the exact moment I noticed it. Not because it was dramatic, but because it shouldn't have been possible at all. The wristband scanner beeped green before I'd even touched it. Patient intake protocol required me to scan each admission band manually, match it to the physical intake form, verify identity against state-issued documentation, and log the timestamp in our security database. I'd been doing this for 3 years at Green Lake Psychiatric facility without a single procedural deviation. The routine was muscle memory by that point. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when I arrived for my 1600 hours shift at the intake security desk. The lobby still smelled faintly of industrial floor cleaner from the afternoon maintenance rounds. I signed into the system badge number 7429 and began my pre-shift equipment check. Scanner operational. Contraband detection wand charged. Visitor log cleared from the day shift. Everything standard. The first admission wasn't scheduled until 1700 hours. I had time to review the day's incident reports, mostly medication refusals and one verbal altercation in the common area that required documentation but no physical intervention. I was halfway through my coffee when the intake coordinator, a woman named Jennifer Moss, who'd worked admissions longer than I'd been employed there, brought down the evening's paperwork. 3 scheduled, she said, setting the manila folders on my desk. 2 voluntary, 1 court-ordered. The court order might give you trouble. History of non-compliance. I nodded and opened the first file. Standard procedure. I always reviewed patient histories before they arrived, noting any behavioral flags, prior incidents, or special security considerations. The first patient was a 19-year-old male, voluntary admission for suicidal ideation. The second was a 43-year-old female, returning patient with bipolar disorder seeking stabilization. The third was the court-ordered case Jennifer had mentioned, a 37-year-old male with a documented history of aggression and paranoid delusions. At 16:55, I prepared the wristbands. Each one had a unique barcode linked to the patient's file in our system. I laid them out in order of expected arrival next to their corresponding intake forms. 3 wristbands, 3 forms, 3 patients. That's when the scanner beeped. I looked down. The screen showed a successful scan. Patient identification number 883762. Timestamp 1656. I hadn't touched anything. The wristband for patient 883762 was still lying on my desk, untouched, next to the intake form for the court-ordered admission. I picked up the scanner, checked the battery, examined the barcode reader for dust or malfunction. Everything appeared normal. I rescanned the wristband manually. The system returned an error. Duplicate scan detected. Patient 883762 already processed at 1656. I called Jennifer on the internal line. Did someone already process the court order admission? No, she said. He's not even here yet. Transport called 20 minutes ago. They're running behind. ETA is now 17:30. I explained what happened. She suggested a system glitch and advised me to log it with IT after my shift. I made a note in my incident pad and continued with the other 2 admissions when they arrived. Both processed without issue. I scanned their wristbands, verified their identities, conducted contraband searches, and escorted them to their respective intake rooms where nursing staff completed medical assessments. By 1800 hours, the court-ordered patient still hadn't arrived. I called transport dispatch. They confirmed the patient had been picked up from county lockup at 15:30 as scheduled. Estimated arrival was 17:30. It was now past that time. At 1840, dispatch called me back. The transport van had experienced mechanical failure on Route 12. The patient was being transferred to a backup vehicle. New ETA 1915. I updated the intake log and continued routine security checks throughout the facility. At 1900 hours, I returned to my desk to prepare for the delayed admission. The wristband for patient 883762 was still lying where I'd left it, but when I checked the system, it showed the patient had been successfully admitted, searched, and escorted to Ward C at 1702. I reviewed the entry 3 times. Every field was completed. Contraband search, negative. Behavioral compliance, cooperative. Security officer badge number 7429. That was my badge number. The signature field showed my digital authorization code entered at 1702. At 1702, I had been escorting the 19-year-old voluntary admission to Ward A. I checked the Ward A logs. They confirmed my presence there at that exact time. I couldn't have been in 2 places simultaneously. Jennifer came down at 1930 to ask about the delay. I showed her the system entry. She frowned, cross-referenced it with her own intake database, and confirmed the same information appeared on her end. According to every official record, patient 883762 had been admitted 73 minutes earlier. Maybe it auto-populated from a previous admission, she offered, though she didn't sound convinced. Same patient number from a prior stay? I checked the patient history. This was his first admission to Green Lake. The identification number had been generated fresh that afternoon specifically for this intake. At 1950, dispatch called again. The backup transport vehicle had arrived at the facility. I went to the secure entrance to receive the patient. 2 transport officers walked him through the reinforced doors. He was handcuffed, visibly agitated, and verbally hostile, standard for court-ordered admissions from lockup. I processed him according to protocol, scanned the wristband, which now registered correctly without error, conducted the contraband search. He resisted minimally, mostly verbal complaints. I documented everything and escorted him to Ward C, where nursing staff took custody. The entire process took 22 minutes. When I returned to my desk and reviewed the logs, both entries remained in the system. The 1702 admission and the 2010 admission. Same patient, same identification number, 2 separate intake records. I printed both reports and took them to my supervisor the next morning. He examined them, checked the timestamps, and reviewed surveillance footage from the intake area. The cameras showed exactly what I remembered, me processing the other 2 patients during the time frame when the system claimed I'd admitted patient 883762. Data corruption, he concluded. It happens. I'll have IT scrub the duplicate entry. But when IT reviewed the logs, they found no corruption. Both entries contained complete data sets, metadata, and timestamp verification from multiple system nodes. Deleting one would require administrative override and incident documentation. My supervisor decided to leave both entries in place with a notation about a technical anomaly. 3 days later, I was reviewing weekly incident reports when I noticed something in the court-ordered patient's file. A behavioral note logged at 17:15 on the day of his admission. It described an interaction during his intake process. The note detailed how I had calmly explained facility rules, de-escalated his verbal aggression, and established rapport before escorting him to the ward. I never had that interaction. When I processed him at 2010, he'd been hostile throughout. No rapport was established, no calm explanation occurred. He'd cursed at me, called the facility a prison, and demanded to speak to his attorney. But the note was logged at 17:15, and it was attributed to me. Badge number 7429. I checked the Ward C surveillance footage from that evening. At 17:02, the camera in the intake corridor showed movement. The angle was partially obscured by a support column. but I could see someone in a security uniform escorting a patient toward the ward entrance. The uniform matched mine exactly. The build, the posture, even the gait looked familiar. I watched the figure pause at the ward door, swipe a badge, and enter with the patient. The timestamp read 17:02. At that exact moment, according to Ward A surveillance, I was 70 meters away in a completely different section of the facility. I never reported what I saw in that footage. I told myself it was a digital artifact, maybe footage from a previous shift that had been mislabeled and overlaid onto the wrong timestamp. But I checked. That corridor camera had never malfunctioned. The metadata confirmed continuous recording without gaps or corruption. 2 weeks later, during a routine shift debrief, my supervisor mentioned that patient 883762 had been remarkably compliant since admission. "Whatever you said to him during intake really made an impact," he said. "The clinical team noted it in their assessment. Good work building that initial trust." I nodded and said nothing. I still work intake security at Green Lake. I still process admissions according to protocol, scanning wristbands and logging timestamps and escorting patients to their designated wards. But sometimes when I review the daily logs, I see entries I don't remember making, actions I don't recall performing. Interactions attributed to me that exist only in the system's memory, not my own. And I've started to wonder how many of my shifts are actually mine and how many belong to whatever was already here, wearing my badge, signing my name, completing intake procedures I never performed. The scanner still beeps sometimes before I touch it. I've stopped reporting it. Some protocols, it seems, don't require my participation at all. Story 2. The night watch guard monitoring an empty camera. My responsibility was simple: monitor 42 cameras across 3 psychiatric wards, document any irregularities, and dispatch response teams when necessary. I'd been working the overnight security shift at Ridgemont Psychiatric Hospital for 6 years. The work was mostly tedious. Hours of watching empty hallways, patients sleeping, and the occasional nurse making medication rounds. The kind of job where nothing happens, and that's exactly how it should be. The control room was located in the basement level, a windowless space with concrete walls and industrial ventilation that hummed constantly. 12 monitors arranged in 3 rows of 4 displayed rotating feeds from cameras throughout the facility. Each monitor cycled through 3 or 4 camera views every 30 seconds unless I locked one to a specific feed for closer observation. I worked alone from 2,300 hours to 700 hours, 5 nights a week. The solitude never bothered me. I preferred it to the day shift chaos, the administrative meetings, the constant radio chatter. Night watch was pure observation. I documented everything in a digital log. Timestamp, camera number, observation, action taken. My logs were always thorough. Management had complimented me multiple times on my attention to detail. It started on a Thursday in late March. I arrived for my shift at 22:50, signed in with badge number 9138, and began my equipment check. All monitors functioning, network connection stable, radio charged and tested. I poured coffee from my thermos and settled into the ergonomic chair that I'd requisitioned after developing lower back pain 2 years prior. The first 3 hours were routine. I logged a medication cart moving through Ward B at midnight. Documented a patient in Ward A who got up to use the bathroom at 0120. Noted a nurse station light malfunction in Ward C at 0200 hours and submitted a maintenance request. Everything ordinary. At 0247, Monitor 7, which cycled through cameras in the secure wing, locked onto a single feed. I hadn't touched the controls. The camera designation in the corner of the screen read, Camera D13, Seclusion Room 4. Seclusion Room 4 was supposed to be unoccupied. I checked the daily census report that the evening shift supervisor had left on my desk. All seclusion rooms were listed as empty. There hadn't been an incident requiring isolation in over a week. But on the monitor, I saw movement. It was subtle, a shift in the shadows near the padded wall. I leaned closer. Seclusion rooms were kept dimly lit at night, just enough illumination for safety checks, but camera D13's feed looked darker than usual. I adjusted the brightness on monitor 7. The image clarified slightly. Someone was sitting against the far wall. I could see the outline of a figure hunched forward, head down. Patients in seclusion were supposed to be checked every 15 minutes, logged and monitored continuously. But the room was listed as empty and no one had been placed there according to any documentation. I radioed the Ward D nurse station. A man named Kenneth Harper answered. He'd worked at Ridgemont longer than I had, a steady, unflappable presence on the night shift. Kenneth, do you have anyone in Seclusion 4? Negative. All seclusion rooms are clear tonight. Why? Camera D13 is showing movement. There was a pause. I'll go check. I watched monitor 7 while I waited. The figure didn't move. It remained in the same position, motionless, exactly as I'd first seen it. 3 minutes later, Kenneth's voice came through the radio. I'm outside Seclusion 4, doors locked. Window shows the room is empty. I looked at the monitor. The figure was still there. Kenneth, I'm looking at the feed right now. There's someone in that room. Another pause, longer this time. I'm looking through the observation window. There's nobody here. Room is completely empty. I took a screenshot of the monitor feed and sent it to the nurse station computer. Kenneth confirmed he received it. He described what he saw. An empty room, padded walls, a drain in the center of the floor. Nothing else. What I saw on the monitor was the same room, same walls, same drain, but with a figure sitting against the back wall. Kenneth suggested a camera malfunction and advised me to log it for maintenance. I created a work order and noted the discrepancy in my shift log. Kenneth returned to the nurse station. The figure on monitor 7 didn't move. At 03:30, the monitor cycled to the next camera in its rotation, showing a hallway in Ward D. I manually switched it back to camera D13. The feed was unchanged. The figure remained in the same position. I spent the next hour reviewing archived footage from camera D13. I accessed recordings from the previous week, scrolling through hours of footage. Every frame showed an empty room. No patients, no staff, no movement. Just an unoccupied seclusion space. But the live feed still showed the figure. At 0500 hours, I decided to inspect the camera myself. I locked my terminal, took the security keys, and walked through the facility to Ward D. The secure wing required 2 badge scans and a numeric code. I entered, checked in with Kenneth at the nurse station, and proceeded down the corridor to Seclusion Room 4. The observation window was set into the reinforced door at eye level. I looked through it. The room was empty. Padded walls, recessed lighting, drain in the floor. No figure, no person, nothing. I unlocked the door and entered. The air inside smelled of industrial cleaning solution and vinyl. I walked the perimeter, checked the corners, examined the walls for any visual anomalies that might explain what I'd seen on the monitor. Everything was exactly as it should be. An empty, secure room. I returned to the control room at 05:35. Monitor 7 was still locked on camera D13. The figure was gone. I reviewed the footage from the time I'd left the control room to the moment I returned. For 33 minutes, the feed showed an empty room. No figure, no movement, just empty space, exactly as I'd observed in person. I documented everything in my shift log and submitted the maintenance request for the camera. I assumed it was a technical glitch, some kind of video processing error that had inserted phantom imagery into the live feed. The maintenance technician inspected camera D13 the following afternoon. He found no malfunctions. The camera was functioning perfectly, the wiring was intact, and the network connection was stable. He ran diagnostics and reviewed the footage. Everything appeared normal. He closed the work order as no issue found. 3 nights later, on Sunday, the figure reappeared. This time I noticed it at 0112. Monitor 7 locked onto camera D13 without my input, and there it was again. The same hunched figure, sitting against the same wall in the same position. I radioed Kenneth immediately. "Seclusion 4 again?" he asked before I could explain. "You've seen it too?" "No," he said. "But you're the third person to report it." He explained that the evening shift security guard had reported the same phenomenon twice in the past week. Both times, physical inspection showed an empty room while the camera feed displayed a figure. The guard had assumed equipment malfunction and logged it accordingly. Kenneth went to check the room again. I watched the monitor while he confirmed over the radio that the room was empty. The figure remained on my screen motionless, exactly as before. "I'm going to stay here for a few minutes," Kenneth said. "Tell me if anything changes." I kept my eyes on monitor 7. The figure didn't move. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes. At 0128, the figure's head lifted slightly. I could see the profile now, or at least the suggestion of one. The lighting was too dim for detail, but the posture had changed. "Kenneth, it moved." "Nothing here. Room is still empty." At 0130, the figure stood. It moved slowly, rising from the floor with what seemed like effort or exhaustion. It walked toward the center of the room, stopped at the drain, and looked down. I couldn't see facial features, just the outline of a person standing motionless in a supposedly empty room. "It's standing now," I said into the radio. "Center of the room by the drain." "I'm looking right at the drain," Kenneth replied, "and there's nothing there." The figure remained standing for approximately 2 minutes, then walked to the door, directly toward the camera's position. As it approached, I expected to see more detail, but the image seemed to blur, becoming less distinct the closer it came. It stopped directly in front of the observation window, where Kenneth was standing on the other side. "It's right in front of you," I said. "I see the empty room," Kenneth said. His voice sounded strained. "But I feel something, like pressure, like someone standing very close." The figure remained there for 30 seconds, then turned and walked back to the far wall, resuming its original seated position. The posture, the angle, everything matched exactly how I'd first seen it. Kenneth left the door and returned to the nurse station. We didn't discuss it further that night. I documented the incident in my log with precise timestamps and descriptions. When my shift ended at 0700 hours, I submitted the log and went home. The following night, I accessed the facility's incident database and searched for historical reports related to Seclusion Room 4. I found 6 entries spanning the past 11 years. 3 were routine documentation of patient isolation periods. 2 were maintenance logs for padding replacement and lighting upgrades. The 6th entry was an incident report from 9 years ago, filed by a night shift nurse named Angela Pratt. The report described a patient who had been placed in Seclusion Room 4 following a violent episode in Ward D. The patient, identified only by a medical record number in accordance with privacy protocols, had remained there for 6 hours under continuous observation. According to the report, at 0215, the patient had stopped responding to verbal prompts. Staff entered the room and found the patient unresponsive. Emergency medical protocols were initiated, but resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. Time of death was documented as 0231. The report concluded with a review finding that all procedures had been followed correctly, and the death was attributed to a cardiac event unrelated to the restraint or isolation. I cross-referenced the timestamp from that incident with my recent observations. The figure had appeared on my monitor at 0247 and 0112, not 0215. But the behavior, sitting against the wall, standing near the drain, approaching the door, matched the described timeline of the patient's final hours in that room. I didn't mention this to anyone. I wasn't sure what it meant, if it meant anything at all. Correlation isn't causation. Surveillance systems malfunction. Pattern recognition makes us see connections that don't exist. But for the next 2 weeks, camera D13 locked onto seclusion room 4 during my shift 6 more times. Each time the figure appeared. Each time physical inspection confirmed the room was empty. And each time the figure followed the same sequence. Sitting, standing, walking to the drain. Approaching the door, returning to the wall. On the 7th occurrence, I decided to review the camera feed in real time while simultaneously recording my own video on my personal phone through the observation window. I wanted to document the discrepancy directly. If the room was empty and the camera showed a figure, I'd have proof of the technical malfunction. I set up my phone on a small tripod I'd brought from home, positioned it to capture the view through the observation window, and returned to the control room. At 0300 hours, monitor 7 locked onto camera D13. The figure appeared. I radioed Kenneth and asked him to stand by the door but not look inside. I didn't want any variable interference. I wanted 2 simultaneous recordings. One from the security camera showing the figure. One from my phone showing the empty room. For 6 minutes, I watched both feeds on my laptop via remote access. The security camera showed the figure seated against the wall. My phone's video showed an empty room. Then at 0306, something changed. On my phone's feed through the observation window, I saw movement. A shadow passed across the floor, briefly visible in the dim light. I radioed Kenneth immediately. "Did you see that?" "See what?" "In the room. Something moved." Kenneth looked through the window. "I don't see anything." But on my phone's recording, the shadow was there. Faint, barely perceptible, but present. And on monitor 7, the figure stood up and walked to the center of the room, directly over where the shadow had appeared on my phone's feed. I stopped the experiment. I retrieved my phone, ended the recording, and returned to the control room. When I reviewed both videos later, frame by frame, the discrepancy was undeniable. The security camera showed a clearly defined figure. My phone showed an empty room with occasional, barely visible shadows. 2 days later, I received a message from the IT department. They were performing routine server maintenance and had noticed unusual metadata attached to camera D13's feed. The camera had been continuously recording for 9 years without interruption, which was standard. But the metadata indicated that the camera had logged continuous motion detection in seclusion room 4 for the same period. 9 years of continuous motion detection in a room that was occupied, at most, a few days per year. The IT technician who contacted me, a man named Robert Shaw, suggested that the camera's motion detection sensor was malfunctioning and creating false positives. But when he reviewed the raw data, he found something else. The motion detection wasn't registering random glitches, it was registering a pattern, the same pattern repeated in loops. A figure entering the frame, sitting, standing, walking to a specific location, approaching the camera and returning to the original position. The loop lasted approximately 47 minutes and had been repeating continuously since the date of the incident report I'd found. Robert reset the camera's motion detection system and recalibrated the sensors. For 3 days, camera D13 functioned normally. No anomalous feeds, no figures, no locked monitoring. On the 4th day, the pattern resumed. I requested a meeting with my supervisor and presented all of my documentation. Shift logs, video recordings, incident reports, metadata analysis. I expected skepticism, maybe a suggestion that I take some time off, a referral to employee wellness services. Instead, my supervisor listened carefully, reviewed everything I'd provided, and then opened a locked file cabinet in his office. He removed a folder labeled Camera D13, Ongoing Technical Documentation. Inside were reports spanning 9 years. Dozens of security guards, nurses, and maintenance staff had documented the same phenomenon. The figure in seclusion room 4, the locked camera feed, the discrepancy between live observation and recorded surveillance. Every report had been logged, investigated, and categorized as unexplained equipment behavior. The camera had been replaced 4 times, the wiring had been completely redone twice. The room itself had been renovated, the padding replaced, the lighting upgraded, even the drain had been sealed and reinstalled. Nothing changed. The figure continued to appear. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked. "Because there's no solution," my supervisor said. "We document it, we maintain the equipment, and we monitor the room. That's the protocol." "But what is it?" He closed the folder and returned it to the cabinet. "It's a technical anomaly that doesn't affect patient safety or facility operations. That's the official position." I asked what the unofficial position was. He didn't answer. "I still work night watch in the control room. I still monitor 42 cameras, document irregularities, and dispatch response teams when necessary. Monitor 7 still locks onto camera D13 several times each week. The figure still appears, following the same pattern it's followed for 9 years. I've stopped radioing Kenneth for confirmation. I've stopped filing maintenance requests. I've stopped asking questions that no one will answer. I just log it. Timestamp, camera number, observation, no action taken. Because the truth is, I don't know if camera D13 is malfunctioning or if it's the only camera that's working correctly. I don't know if I'm watching a technical error or if I'm watching something that happened 9 years ago still happening over and over in a space that exists somewhere between the camera's memory and the room's history. All I know is that seclusion room 4 is always listed as empty, but someone is always there, and I'm the one assigned to keep watching. Story 3. The restraint team officer who logged no resistance. I served on the emergency response team at Pinewood Psychiatric Hospital for 7 years. Our function was specific: respond to violent incidents, implement physical restraints when necessary, and de-escalate situations that threaten patient or staff safety. Every activation required precise documentation, use of force reports, witness statements, body camera footage. The process was designed to ensure accountability and protect both patients and staff from harm. I'd participated in 63 restraint incidents before the one I'm going to describe. Each followed the same protocol: dispatch call, team assembly, situation assessment, verbal de-escalation attempt, and, if necessary, physical intervention. The entire sequence was trained, rehearsed, and documented according to state regulations and facility policy. The call came on a Wednesday evening in mid-November at 1832. I was finishing administrative work in the security office when my radio activated. Code Gray, Ward F, common area, aggressive patient. Immediate response required. I acknowledged the call with badge number 5613 and proceeded to the emergency equipment room. Standard gear included a body camera, radio, protective gloves, and restraint positioning aids. I activated my camera as required, checked the battery indicator, and confirmed recording status. Green light, active recording. 2 other team members arrived simultaneously. Michael Brennan and Lisa Tomlinson, both experienced responders with multiple years on the team. We proceeded to Ward F as a unit, maintaining communication with the charge nurse via radio. The charge nurse, a woman named Patricia Dunn, provided situation details as we approached. The patient, a 34-year-old male admitted 6 days prior with acute psychosis, had become increasingly agitated during the evening medication round. He'd refused his prescribed antipsychotic, overturned a chair, and verbally threatened staff. He was currently in the common area, pacing aggressively and non-responsive to verbal redirection. We arrived at Ward F at 1837. I could see the patient through the common area window before we entered. He was pacing rapidly, gesturing emphatically, speaking loudly, though I couldn't distinguish words through the reinforced glass. 2 nurses stood near the doorway, maintaining distance as protocol required. Patricia met us at the ward entrance and briefed us quickly. "He's escalating. I don't think verbal intervention is going to work. He's disconnected from reality right now." I nodded and turned to Michael and Lisa. "Standard approach, I'll take lead on verbal. Lisa, you position left, Michael right. If we need to go hands-on." We follow restraint protocol exactly. We entered the common area. The patient immediately focused on us. His name was Aaron Mills, though I only learned that later from the incident report. In the moment, he was a patient in crisis, and our job was to resolve the situation safely. "Aaron," I said, keeping my voice calm and level, "I need you to take a breath and sit down. We're here to help you." He responded with a string of incoherent statements, something about signals and frequencies and people listening through the walls. Classic paranoid delusion. He wasn't hearing me. His eyes moved constantly, scanning the room, fixing on objects that weren't there. I tried again, using techniques I'd refined over 7 years. Speak slowly, use simple language, offer choices, maintain non-threatening posture. "Aaron, I understand you're feeling overwhelmed. Let's sit down together and talk about what you need." He moved toward me quickly, not running, but walking with purpose and aggression. His fists were clenched. His expression showed no recognition of my presence as a person, only as a threat to whatever reality he was experiencing. This was the decision point: continue verbal de-escalation or implement physical restraint. The policy was clear: if the patient poses an imminent risk of harm to self or others, physical intervention is authorized. I made the call. Going hands-on. Michael and Lisa moved into position. The technique we used was called supported restraint, designed to control the patient's movement while minimizing injury risk. I approached from the front, Michael from the right, Lisa from the left. The goal was to guide the patient to the floor in a controlled manner, secure his limbs, and hold the position until chemical sedation could be administered by nursing staff. But as I stepped forward, something happened that I've been unable to explain adequately in any official documentation. The patient stopped moving. His posture changed instantly from aggressive to compliant. He looked directly at me, his expression clearing, and he sat down on the floor. Not slowly or reluctantly, but immediately. He placed his hands on his knees, lowered his head, and remained completely still. I stopped. Michael and Lisa stopped. We looked at each other, confused but relieved. This was the best possible outcome of voluntary de-escalation without physical intervention. "Aaron," I said, "thank you for calming down. We're going to have a nurse check on you, make sure you're okay." He didn't respond, but he didn't resist either. He remained seated, hands on knees, head down, breathing normally. Patricia entered with a syringe of emergency sedative, standard protocol, even when a patient appeared calm. Psychotic breaks could re-escalate without warning. Aaron accepted the injection without resistance. Within minutes, he was drowsy and cooperative. We assisted him to his room, ensured he was safe, and cleared the scene. The entire incident lasted less than 10 minutes. 0 use of force. 0 injuries. A textbook example of effective verbal de-escalation resulting in voluntary patient compliance. I returned to the security office and began writing my report. Use of force documentation was required even when no force was used to establish a complete record of the incident and the decision-making process. I described the situation, the patient's behavior, my verbal intervention, and the outcome. I emphasized the patient's voluntary compliance and noted that no physical restraint had been necessary. I submitted the report at 2000 hours and uploaded my body camera footage to the secure server as required. Every restraint team activation, regardless of outcome, required video review by the shift supervisor within 24 hours. The next morning, I received a message from my supervisor, a retired police officer named Daniel Cross, who'd managed security at Pinewood for 15 years. He wanted to see me in his office immediately. I assumed it was routine follow-up. Supervisors often discussed restraint incidents with team members to review technique, provide feedback, or address procedural questions. Daniel's expression was strange when I entered his office. Not angry, not concerned, but confused in a way I'd never seen from him before. "I reviewed your footage from last night," he said. "Okay, is there a problem?" He turned his computer monitor so I could see it. The video player showed my body camera footage from the Ward F incident. I recognized the timestamp, 1837, the moment we'd entered the common area. "Watch this," Daniel said and pressed play. I watched the screen. The footage showed exactly what I remembered. We entered the ward. The patient, Aaron, was pacing and agitated. I spoke to him calmly. He continued pacing. I gave the order to go hands-on. Michael and Lisa moved into position, and then, on the video, I watched myself approach the patient, execute a perfect supported restraint technique, guide him to the floor and hold the position while Michael secured his legs and Lisa supported his upper body. The entire physical restraint was visible in clear detail. It lasted 45 seconds. The patient resisted moderately throughout. No excessive force was used. Everything was by the book, except none of it happened. "That's not what occurred," I said. Daniel paused the video. "This is your body camera footage. Timestamp authenticated, no editing. This is what was recorded." He didn't resist. He sat down voluntarily. We never touched him. Daniel rewound the footage and played it again. I watched the restraint unfold exactly as before, my voice on the audio giving clear directions to Michael and Lisa, the patient's voice shouting and resistant, the sound of our boots on the floor, the controlled breathing, the calm confirmation once the patient was secured. "I need you to watch something else," Daniel said. He opened 2 more video files, one from Michael's body camera, one from Lisa's. He played them simultaneously alongside mine. All 3 showed the same event from 3 different angles. A physical restraint, 45 seconds, moderate resistance, textbook execution. "I don't understand," I said. "Neither do I," Daniel replied. "But I need to know. Did you physically restrain this patient or not?" "No." He sat down voluntarily. I wrote it in my report. Daniel opened my written report on his screen. I read it again. It described exactly what the video showed. Physical restraint, moderate resistance, professional execution of protocol. Voluntary patient compliance was never mentioned. "I didn't write that," I said. Daniel scrolled to the bottom of the report. Digital signature, badge number 5613, my badge number. Timestamp, 2000 hours, the exact time I'd submitted my report. "I wrote about verbal de-escalation," I said. "The patient sat down voluntarily. I specifically noted that no physical force was used." Daniel closed the files and leaned back in his chair. "Here's what I know. 3 body cameras recorded a physical restraint. 1 written report documents a physical restraint. The patient has no injuries, which is consistent with proper technique. The nursing staff confirms that when they arrived, the patient was already controlled and on the floor. Everything is documented correctly and professionally. But that's not what happened. Then what did happen? I tried to explain it again, but as I spoke, the memory felt uncertain. I could see the video footage in my mind now, overlaying what I thought I remembered. Had the patient sat down voluntarily, or had we restrained him? The video evidence was clear and unambiguous. 3 cameras, 3 angles, 1 consistent event. Maybe I'm misremembering, I said finally. It was a tense situation. Maybe my perception of events was distorted. Daniel considered this. That happens. Stress affects memory. But your report was filed 3 hours after the incident, and it matches the video exactly. If you were misremembering, you would have documented the distorted memory, not the accurate event. I had no response to that. Daniel closed the meeting with standard procedure. The incident was properly documented, no policy violations occurred, and the patient was safe. He advised me to take the rest of the day off and return to my regular schedule the following shift. I went home and tried to reconstruct the evening in my mind. I remembered entering the ward. I remembered the patient pacing. I remembered speaking to him. And then there was a gap, a blurred space where 2 different memories existed simultaneously. In one, he sat down calmly. In the other, I restrained him professionally. I couldn't reconcile them. 3 weeks later, I was involved in another code gray response, this time in Ward B. A different patient, a different situation, but similar circumstances. Acute psychosis, aggressive behavior, non-responsive to verbal intervention. I gave the order to go hands-on. We approached the patient, and just like before, he stopped resisting. He became immediately calm, sat down, and complied without physical contact. I filed my report describing verbal de-escalation and voluntary compliance. The next day, Daniel called me to his office again. The body camera footage showed a physical restraint. The written report I'd submitted documented a physical restraint. Same discrepancy, same impossible contradiction. This is the second time, Daniel said. Same pattern. You remember verbal de-escalation? The video shows physical restraint. Your written report matches the video. I know what I experienced, I said. I believe you. But I also believe the video evidence. Over the next 4 months, I responded to 9 more code gray activations. Every single one followed the same pattern. I remembered calm, voluntary compliance. The video showed professional physical restraint. My reports documented what the video showed, not what I remembered. Daniel eventually removed me from active restraint team duties and reassigned me to administrative security work. Not as punishment, he explained, but because the discrepancy between my perception and the documented evidence suggested a psychological issue that needed to be addressed before I could safely return to emergency response work. He referred me to the Employee Assistance Program. I met with a counselor who specialized in occupational stress. I described the situation. She suggested dissociative episodes triggered by the stress of physical confrontation. A coping mechanism where my mind reframed violent encounters as peaceful resolutions to protect me from the psychological impact of the work. The explanation made sense. It was clinical, reasonable, and supported by psychological research. I accepted it because the alternative was accepting that video evidence from multiple cameras was somehow less reliable than my own distorted memory. But I've reviewed that footage dozens of times. I've watched myself execute perfect restraint techniques on patients I remember never touching. I've heard my own voice giving commands I don't remember speaking. I've read reports I don't remember writing, signed with my badge number, describing events I didn't experience. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if the person on that video is really me at all, or if there's another version of me. One that does the work I can't bring myself to do. One that makes the difficult decisions and takes the necessary actions while I watch from somewhere else entirely, remembering a gentler version of events that never occurred. I still work at Pinewood, but I don't respond to code gray activations anymore. I process paperwork, monitor access points, and review surveillance footage. Sometimes I see restraint team responses on the security cameras. I watch officers I used to work with execute the same techniques I used to perform, and I can't help but notice how calm the patients become, how quickly the situations resolve, how professional and precise everything appears. Almost like someone else is doing the work for them too. Someone they won't remember, but who will be there in every official record, every video frame, every documented report, doing what needs to be done while they remember something gentler, something easier to live with. I suppose some protocols are too difficult to remember accurately. Maybe that's why we have cameras. Story 4. The perimeter guard assigned to internal patrol. My position at Crestview Psychiatric Hospital was specifically defined: exterior perimeter security. I monitored access points, conducted grounds patrol, and prevented unauthorized exits. I worked the overnight shift from 2300 hours to 0700 hours, Tuesday through Saturday. The role required constant movement, regular checkpoint scans, and detailed logging of any exterior door activations or perimeter breaches. I'd held this position for 4 years without incident. The work was solitary but straightforward. I knew every exit, every access point, every section of the fence line that enclosed the facility's 8-acre campus. I could walk the entire perimeter in 41 minutes, scanning 18 security checkpoints with my badge to verify completion of each round. The facility itself was a 3-story structure with 2 wings extending from a central administrative core. Ward A and Ward B occupied the first floor. Ward C and Ward D were on the second floor. The third floor housed administrative offices, medical records, and storage. My patrol route kept me outside these spaces, focused on the exterior doors, emergency exits, loading dock, and perimeter fence. On a Thursday night in early September, I arrived for my shift at 2250, signed in with badge number 3724, and received my assignment from the day shift supervisor. Everything was standard. No incidents to report. All exterior doors secured, perimeter clear. I began my first patrol at 2315, starting at the main entrance and proceeding clockwise around the building. Checkpoint 1 through 18, each scanned and logged automatically through the badge system. The night was cool and quiet. I completed the first round in 40 minutes and returned to the exterior security post near the main entrance. At 0100 hours, my radio activated. The night shift operations manager, a man named Roger Vance, requested my presence in the central security office for a temporary reassignment. I acknowledged and proceeded inside. Roger met me in the office with a clipboard and a concerned expression. "We're short-staffed tonight," he explained. "One of the internal patrol officers called in sick. I need you to cover interior rounds for the rest of the shift." I'd never worked internal patrol. That was a separate security function focused on monitoring interior corridors, patient wards, and staff areas. Different checkpoints, different routes, different protocols. "I'm not familiar with the interior patrol sequence," I said. "It's straightforward," Roger said. "I'll give you the checkpoint map. 18 interior locations, same as your exterior route. Just scan your badge at each one and complete the circuit every 45 minutes. Start at the main lobby and work your way through both floors." He handed me a laminated map showing the interior checkpoint locations. I studied it briefly. The route covered all major corridors, nurse stations, and stairwell access points across the first and second floors. The third floor was not included in the patrol sequence. "What about perimeter patrol?" I asked. "We'll manage with surveillance monitoring for tonight. The interior coverage is more critical right now." I accepted the reassignment and began the interior route at 0130. The first checkpoint was in the main lobby near the reception desk. I scanned my badge. The system beeped confirmation. I proceeded down the first-floor corridor toward Ward A. The interior environment felt different from my usual exterior patrol. Enclosed, temperature-controlled, artificially lit. I passed nurse stations where staff sat completing paperwork. I walked past patient rooms with doors closed, windows showing sleeping occupants. Everything was quiet and routine. I completed the first interior round at 0219, 49 minutes after starting. Each checkpoint had scanned successfully. I returned to the main lobby and prepared to begin the second round. At 0300 hours, I received a radio call from Roger. "How's the interior patrol going?" "No issues. Second round is in progress." "Good. Also, just confirming you're still running perimeter, correct?" I paused. "No, you reassigned me to interior patrol at 0100 hours. There was a long silence on the radio. "I need you to come back to the security office." I proceeded there immediately. Roger was standing at the computer terminal that displayed real-time badge scan data. He looked confused. "According to the system, you've been scanning both interior and exterior checkpoints simultaneously for the past 2 hours. He turned the monitor toward me. The log showed my badge number, 3724, registering scans at exterior checkpoints in the standard perimeter sequence, while also registering scans at interior checkpoints in the route I'd just completed. At 0142, my badge scanned exterior checkpoint 7, the east fence line near the loading dock. At the same time, it scanned interior checkpoint 3, the Ward A corridor junction. At 0205, my badge scanned exterior checkpoint 12, the north emergency exit. Simultaneously, it scanned interior checkpoint 9, the second-floor stairwell access. The dual logging continued across every checkpoint. According to the system, I had completed a full perimeter patrol and a full interior patrol at the same time. "That's not possible," I said. "I know it's not possible, but the scans are authenticated, correct badge number, correct timestamp, correct locations. I've been inside the entire time. I haven't been outside since I came in to meet with you at 0100 hours." Roger reviewed the surveillance footage from the exterior cameras. He found clips showing a figure in a security uniform conducting perimeter patrol. The figure moved methodically from checkpoint to checkpoint, scanning a badge at each location. The timestamps matched the scan logs exactly. The uniform matched mine. The build looked similar. The movements followed the standard patrol pattern I'd used for 4 years. "Is someone else using your badge?" Roger asked. "I have my badge." I held it up. Badge number 3724 attached to my belt as required. Roger checked the badge inventory system. Only one badge with number 3724 had ever been issued. It was assigned to me. No duplicates existed in the system. "This doesn't make sense," Roger said, "but we need to figure it out. Continue the interior patrol as assigned. I'll review more footage and try to identify who's running perimeter." I resumed the interior patrol. For the next 4 hours, until my shift ended at 0700 hours, I completed the interior checkpoint sequence 4 more times. Each time, the system logged my badge at both interior and exterior locations simultaneously. Roger reviewed all available surveillance footage from the exterior cameras. Every perimeter patrol was visible. A security officer in uniform moving through the standard route, scanning checkpoints with practiced efficiency. The footage was clear enough to show that it was my uniform, my patrol pattern, my routine. But it wasn't me. I was inside the entire time. When the day shift supervisor arrived at 0650, Roger briefed him on the situation. They decided to review the badge scan data going back several weeks to see if this dual logging pattern had occurred before. They found it immediately. For the past 19 days, every shift I'd worked showed the same pattern. Dual scans, simultaneous exterior and interior checkpoint logging. My badge number recorded in 2 places at once, consistently across nearly 80 hours of patrol work. Why didn't the system flag this as an anomaly? I asked. The day shift supervisor, a former military police officer named Travis Kemp, explained that the badge system only flagged duplicate scans if they occurred within a certain time threshold, typically under 5 seconds. The dual scans in my logs were separated by enough time, sometimes 30 or 40 seconds, that the system interpreted them as rapid but plausible movements between nearby checkpoints. Except the checkpoints weren't nearby. They were on opposite sides of the facility or on different floors or separated by locked doors that required badge access to open. I've only been doing perimeter patrol, I said. I've never been assigned to interior patrol before last night. Travis pulled up my assignment history. For the past 19 days, I had been assigned to interior patrol on every shift. My schedule showed no perimeter assignments during that period. That's incorrect, I said. I've been doing perimeter patrol. It's my regular assignment. I've been doing it for 4 years. Travis showed me the digital records. Assignment logs, supervisor notes, even payroll coding all indicated interior patrol. Roger confirmed he'd been assigning me to interior rounds for the past 3 weeks due to ongoing staffing shortages. I had no memory of any interior patrol assignments before last night. Every shift I remembered was perimeter work, exterior doors, fence line checkpoints, grounds patrol. That was my job. That had always been my job. Let me check something, Travis said. He accessed the personnel database and opened my employment record. Position title, Interior Patrol Security Officer. Assignment start date, 19 days ago. Previous position, Exterior Perimeter Security Officer. Assignment end date, 19 days ago. According to every official record, I had been reassigned from perimeter to interior patrol 3 weeks earlier. A standard operational transfer due to staffing needs. I'd apparently acknowledged the reassignment with my digital signature. The documentation was complete and properly filed. But I remembered none of it. Every shift I'd worked in the past 3 weeks, I remembered doing perimeter patrol, exterior checkpoints, fence line rounds, the same work I'd been doing for 4 years. Travis suggested I take a few days off while they investigated the badge system malfunction and reviewed the personnel records for errors. He reassured me that this appeared to be an administrative or technical issue, not a performance problem. I went home and tried to reconstruct the past 3 weeks. I reviewed my personal calendar, my own notes, anything that might confirm what I'd actually been doing during my shifts. I had very little documentation. I'd never needed to track my own activities because the badge system did it automatically. I called a colleague, another security officer who worked the day shift exterior patrol. I asked him if he'd seen me on the grounds during any recent shifts. No, he said, but I wouldn't. Your shift ends when mine starts. We don't overlap. I asked if he'd noticed anything unusual about the perimeter checkpoints, any maintenance issues or irregularities that might suggest the checkpoints weren't being scanned regularly. Everything's been normal, he said. All checkpoints are scanning on schedule. Whoever's running the overnight perimeter patrol is doing it correctly. I returned to work 3 days later. Travis met with me before my shift and explained that they'd been unable to identify the source of the badge system anomaly. The dual logging had stopped after my last shift. All systems were now functioning normally. He suggested the issue might have been a database synchronization error that had resolved itself. My assignment was officially confirmed as interior patrol. I accepted it without argument. I didn't know what else to do. I worked that shift and every shift since conducting interior rounds. I scanned checkpoints in corridors and stairwells and ward junctions. I've learned the route. I've become efficient at it. It feels routine now. But sometimes, when I'm walking the second floor corridor near the windows that overlook the facility grounds, I see someone outside. A figure in a security uniform moving along the fence line conducting perimeter patrol. The movements are methodical and familiar. The figure scans checkpoints at the same pace I used to use, following the same route I followed for 4 years. I've mentioned it to Travis. He's reviewed the exterior surveillance footage during my shifts. No one is there. The grounds are empty. Perimeter patrol is currently unfilled due to staffing limitations. The exterior checkpoints aren't being scanned at all, but the figure is there. I see it almost every night. Walking the perimeter, scanning checkpoints, doing the work I remember doing but apparently never did. I don't report it anymore. I just complete my interior rounds, scan my checkpoints, and log my observations. The badge system records my location accurately now. I'm always inside, never outside, exactly where I'm assigned to be. And somewhere outside, someone wearing my uniform continues the patrol I thought was mine. Scanning checkpoints with a badge that doesn't exist, completing rounds that no one remembers assigning, doing the work that official records insist I stopped doing 19 days ago. I've started to wonder if reassignments work differently here. If when they move you from one post to another, something stays behind. Something that keeps working the old route, following the old protocols, completing the old assignments. And maybe that's necessary. Maybe facilities like this need continuity, need someone always walking the perimeter, even if that someone isn't quite the person who was originally assigned to do it. I work interior patrol now. That's what the records say. That's what I remember. And if something else is still walking the fence line outside, scanning checkpoints in my name, then maybe that's just another function of institutional security. One I was never trained for, but one I seem to be performing anyway. Story 5, the Transport Security Officer and the Missing Handoff. My role at Hillside Psychiatric Hospital was patient transport security. I escorted patients between facilities, accompanied them to external medical appointments, and ensured safe custody transfers during interfacility admissions or discharges. Every transport required detailed documentation, departure time, route taken, arrival time, receiving facility signature, and any incidents during transit. I'd been working patient transport for 5 years, completing an average of 8 to 12 transports per week. The work required constant attention to detail, clear communication with receiving facilities, and strict adherence to chain of custody protocols. No patient could be transported without proper authorization, and no patient could be released without documented acknowledgement from qualified receiving staff. The incident occurred on a Tuesday afternoon in late February. I received transport orders at 1300 hours for a patient transfer from Hillside to Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility, approximately 47 miles away. The patient, a 29-year-old woman I'll refer to as patient 1214 for documentation purposes, had been stabilized at Hillside and was being transferred to Meadowbrook for long-term residential treatment. I reviewed the transport authorization, confirmed the receiving facility had a bed assignment, and verified that all required documentation was complete. Everything was in order. I proceeded to Ward B, where patient 1214 was waiting with her assigned nurse, a woman named Ellen Rowe who'd worked at Hillside for 9 years. "She's ready to go," Ellen said. "Calm, cooperative, all belongings packed. Medication list is in her file." I introduced myself to the patient and explained the transport process. She acknowledged understanding and gathered her small bag of personal items. We proceeded to the secure transport vehicle. a white van equipped with passenger restraints, though they weren't necessary for this transfer. Patient 1214 was voluntary and compliant. I secured her seatbelt, confirmed she was comfortable, and began the standard departure documentation. I logged the departure time, 1400 hours, my badge number 6852, the patient's identification number, and the destination facility. I radioed Hillside Dispatch to confirm departure, received acknowledgement, and began the drive. The route to Meadowbrook followed State Route 19 north for 32 miles, then transitioned to County Road 8 for the remaining 15 miles. Traffic was light. Weather was clear. The drive was uneventful. Patient 1214 sat quietly, looking out the window, occasionally asking questions about the new facility. I answered her questions with basic information. Meadowbrook was a smaller, residential-focused facility with more independence and community integration than Hillside's acute care environment. It was a positive step in her treatment progress. We arrived at Meadowbrook at 15:08, slightly ahead of the estimated 15:15 arrival time. I parked in the designated transport area and radioed Meadowbrook's intake office to announce our arrival. A voice I didn't recognize responded. "Transport for patient 1214? Confirmed. Arriving from Hillside. Ready for custody transfer. Proceed to intake 3. Staff will meet you there." I assisted patient 1214 from the vehicle and escorted her to intake 3, a small office near the facility's main entrance. A staff member in scrubs was waiting. I didn't recognize her, but that was normal. I'd only transported to Meadowbrook twice before, and staff turnover in psychiatric facilities was common. "I have patient 1214 for admission," I said, presenting the transport documentation. The staff member reviewed the paperwork briefly and nodded. "We've been expecting her. Thank you for the transport. I need a receiving signature," I said, offering my electronic tablet where custody transfers were documented. The staff member looked at the tablet, then at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. Confusion maybe, or uncertainty. "You need me to sign for custody transfer?" she asked. "Yes. Standard protocol. I can't release the patient without documented acknowledgement from receiving facility staff." She hesitated, then took the tablet and signed her name. The signature was digital, captured with the stylus. The system logged it automatically. Receiving staff name, credentials, timestamp, facility location. Everything required for a complete custody transfer. "Thank you," I said. I turned to patient 1214. "You're all set. Best of luck with your treatment here." She smiled slightly and thanked me. The Meadowbrook staff member guided her down a corridor toward what I assumed were the intake assessment rooms. I returned to the transport vehicle, updated my documentation to reflect successful transfer completion, and radioed Hillside Dispatch. "Transport complete. Patient 1214 transferred to Meadowbrook at 15:13, returning to Hillside." "Acknowledged," Dispatch responded. "See you back at base." The return drive was routine. I arrived at Hillside at 16:03, parked the transport vehicle, and returned to the security office to complete final paperwork. Every transport required a comprehensive report: departure and arrival times, patient behavior during transit, any incidents or complications, and confirmation of receiving facility custody acceptance. I completed the report, attached the digital signatures and timestamps, and submitted it to the Transport Coordination Database at 16:22. My supervisor would review it within 24 hours as part of standard quality assurance. I worked 2 more shifts that week without thinking about the Meadowbrook transport. It had been straightforward, professional, and properly documented. Exactly the kind of transport that required no follow-up. On Friday afternoon, I received a message from my supervisor. a retired paramedic named Claire Stevens who'd managed patient transport operations at Hillside for 12 years. She asked me to come to her office immediately. I assumed it was routine administrative discussion, maybe scheduling for the following week or a procedural update. Claire's expression when I entered suggested otherwise. "I need you to explain something," she said, turning her computer monitor toward me. The screen displayed my transport report from Tuesday, the Meadowbrook transfer. "Okay, what's the issue?" "Did you complete this transport?" "Yes, everything went smoothly. Patient was cooperative throughout, no incidents." Claire clicked through several screens, pulling up different documents. "You departed Hillside at 1400 hours, correct?" "Yes, that's documented in the report." "And you arrived at Meadowbrook at 1508? "Correct. Slightly ahead of schedule." "And you obtained a receiving signature from Meadowbrook staff?" "Yes. A staff member in Intake 3, she signed the digital transfer form." Claire enlarged the section of my report that showed the receiving signature. The signature field was blank. No name, no timestamp, no staff credentials. Just an empty field where the digital signature should have been. "That's not possible," I said. I watched her sign it. The system logged it. Claire opened another file. "I contacted Meadowbrook this morning to follow up on a different patient transfer. While I had them on the line, I asked about patient 1214. They have no record of her admission. They have to. I delivered her there personally. According to Meadowbrook, they never received a patient 1214. No admission paperwork. No intake assessment, no bed assignment. She's not in their system." I didn't understand what Claire was telling me. "I transported her there. I handed her over to staff in Intake 3. I have timestamps, documentation, everything required." "Except the receiving signature," Claire said, "which is the only proof that Meadowbrook accepted custody." "But I saw her sign it." Claire closed the files and looked at me directly. "Here's what I need you to understand. According to every official record, you departed Hillside with patient 1214 at 1400 hours, drove to Meadowbrook, and returned to Hillside at 1603. But there's no documentation that you actually transferred the patient, and Meadowbrook has no record of receiving her. Where is she now?" Claire paused before answering. "She's in Ward B. She never left." I sat down. Nothing Claire was saying made sense. "I transported her. I drove her to Meadowbrook. She was in the vehicle with me for over an hour. According to Ward B records, patient 1214 was present on the ward throughout Tuesday afternoon. She attended group therapy at 1430 and had a medication review at 1600 hours. Staff documented her participation in both activities." "That's impossible. She was with me." Claire pulled up another document. Ward B's daily patient census log. Patient 1214 was listed as present and accounted for during every shift check on Tuesday. No notation of transport, no temporary absence, no off-ward activity. Just continuous presence in Ward B throughout the day. "Did you check the transport vehicle?" I asked. "There must be evidence. Personal items, documentation, something that proves she was in that vehicle." "The vehicle was inspected Thursday morning as part of routine maintenance. Nothing unusual was found. No personal items, no evidence of recent patient transport." I tried to remember specific details from the drive. Conversations we'd had, questions she'd asked, the route I'd taken, the traffic conditions. Everything felt clear in my memory, but Claire's documentation suggested none of it had happened. "I need to speak with Ellen Rowe," I said. "She was the nurse who prepared the patient for transport. She handed her over to me in Ward B." Claire made a phone call and asked Ellen to come to her office. While we waited, I reviewed my own documentation again. Every field was completed except the receiving signature. Departure time, route, arrival time, patient behavior, all documented in detail. But the crucial element, the signature that proved custody transfer, was absent. Ellen arrived and Claire explained the situation. Ellen's response was immediate and certain. I didn't prepare anyone for transport on Tuesday. I worked the afternoon shift in Ward B, but there were no scheduled transports that day. You handed patient 1214 over to me at Ward B's secure exit, I said. You told me she was calm, cooperative, and ready to go. Ellen shook her head. I remember Tuesday clearly. Patient 1214 was on the ward all day. She attended activities, had her medication review, spent time in the common area. She never left the ward. Check your own documentation, I said. You must have logged the transport preparation. Ellen pulled up Ward B's nursing notes on her phone. She scrolled through Tuesday's entries. I documented her group therapy participation at 14:30, her medication review at 1600 hours, dinner at 17:30, nothing about transport preparation. I asked Claire if we could review surveillance footage from Ward B. If I'd escorted the patient from the ward, the cameras would have recorded it. Claire accessed the security system and pulled up footage from Ward B's secure exit on Tuesday afternoon. We watched from 13:30 through 14:30. Staff members came and went. Patients moved between common areas in their rooms. I never appeared on the footage. Patient 1214 was visible multiple times, sitting in the common area, talking with other patients, attending the group therapy session Ellen had documented. At no point did I escort her from the ward. I don't understand this, I said. I remember the entire transport, every detail, the drive, the conversation, the arrival at Meadowbrook, the staff member who signed for custody. Claire suggested I take the rest of the day off and return Monday for a follow-up discussion. She emphasized that this appeared to be a documentation error rather than a performance issue, but it needed to be investigated thoroughly. I drove home and tried to make sense of what had happened. I reviewed my own memories systematically, looking for inconsistencies or gaps. Everything felt coherent. I remembered preparing the vehicle, escorting the patient from Ward B, driving to Meadowbrook, completing the transfer. All of it felt as real as any transport I'd ever completed. But the documentation told a different story. The patient had never left Hillside. I'd driven to Meadowbrook and returned, but apparently I'd done so alone. And yet my mileage log showed the correct distance for a round trip to Meadowbrook. My fuel consumption was consistent with a 47-mile drive each direction. The timestamps aligned perfectly with the route and estimated travel time. Everything except the patient. On Monday, I met with Claire and a human resources representative. They asked me to describe the transport again in detail. I did, providing every piece of information I could remember. They took notes and asked clarifying questions. Have you experienced any similar incidents? The HR representative asked. Memories that don't align with documentation? No, never. Any recent stress, personal issues, health concerns that might affect memory or perception? No. I've been working transports for 5 years without any problems. They concluded the meeting by placing me on temporary administrative leave while they conducted a comprehensive review of all my recent transports. They wanted to verify that other transfers had been properly documented and completed according to protocol. The review took 11 days. Claire contacted me on a Thursday afternoon with the results. Of the 37 transports I'd completed in the previous 3 months, 4 showed the same pattern as the Meadowbrook incident. Complete documentation except for receiving signatures. And in all 4 cases, the patients I'd transported were documented as never having left their originating facilities. 4 patients I remembered transporting who, according to all official records, never left Hillside at all. Claire offered me the option to return to work in a different capacity, perhaps facility security rather than patient transport. She framed it as a temporary reassignment while they investigated the documentation system for potential technical failures. I accepted the reassignment. I still work at Hillside, but I don't transport patients anymore. I monitor access points, conduct interior patrols, and review surveillance footage. The work is less complicated. No custody transfers, no receiving signatures, no chain of custody protocols. But sometimes I'm assigned to monitor the transport vehicle area, and I watch other transport officers load patients, complete their departure documentation, and drive away toward receiving facilities 40 or 50 miles distant. And I can't help but wonder if they'll arrive at those facilities and find staff waiting to sign for custody. Or if they'll complete the transfer, watch someone sign the digital forms and return to Hillside only to discover that the signature was never recorded, the patient never left, and the entire transport exists only in their memory and their mileage logs. I still remember driving patient 1214 to Meadowbrook. I remember her questions about the new facility. I remember the staff member in Intake 3 who signed for custody. I remember all of it with perfect clarity. But the records say I drove there alone, returned alone, and completed a transfer that never occurred. And I've started to accept that maybe both things are true. Maybe I did transport patients who never left. Maybe custody transfers can be completed without anyone receiving custody. Maybe some protocols exist in a space between departure and arrival, where everything is documented correctly except the moment that proves it actually happened. I don't question it anymore. I just work my shifts, monitor my assigned areas, and let other officers handle the transports. Because I've learned that in places like this, completion doesn't always require arrival, and handoffs can be documented perfectly even when no one's there to receive what you're handing over. Story 6. The control room guard who authorized his own override. I operated the security control station at Whitmore Psychiatric Hospital for 11 years. My responsibility was access control management, monitoring electronic locks, authorizing door overrides, and maintaining security protocol during emergencies. The facility used a centralized electronic access system with 423 controlled entry points. Every door, every gate, every secure area required badge authorization or manual override from my station. Override authority was strictly limited. Emergency situations, equipment malfunctions, or authorized administrative access required specific protocols. All overrides required dual authorization. My approval as control room operator and secondary confirmation from a roving patrol officer or shift supervisor. No single person could override a secured door alone. The system was designed to prevent unauthorized access and ensure accountability. I worked the overnight shift, 2,300 hours to 700 hours, Wednesday through Sunday. The control station was a 12-foot by 12-foot room on the ground floor of the administrative wing, separated from patient areas by 2 locked corridors and a security checkpoint. Inside the station were 6 monitors displaying access control status, a computer terminal linked to the override system, and communication equipment connecting me to patrol officers and facility staff. The incident began on a Saturday night in mid-April. I arrived for my shift at 2250, signed in with badge number 4297, and completed my standard equipment checks. All systems operational. Communication channels clear. No maintenance alerts or security advisories. The first 4 hours of the shift were routine. I processed 3 authorized overrides. 1 for maintenance staff accessing a mechanical room at 100 hours. 1 for a nursing supervisor entering a medication storage area at 230, and one for a patrol officer conducting a security check in an administrative office at 0315. Each override followed protocol exactly. I received the request via radio, verified the requester's credentials, confirmed the authorization reason, and entered the override code after receiving secondary approval from another authorized staff member. At 0441, the system registered an override request at door 227, a secure access point between Ward C and the internal courtyard. The request appeared on my screen as a standard alert. Door 227 override requested awaiting authorization. I checked the facility map on my secondary monitor. Door 227 was a controlled exit used primarily for supervised patient recreation during daytime hours. It should not have been accessed during overnight shifts unless there was an emergency or authorized maintenance activity. I radioed the Ward C nurse station. Control to Ward C. Do you have an override request for door 227? The response came from a nurse named Gregory Palmer, someone I'd communicated with dozens of times during previous shifts. Negative, Control. No activity in that area. All patients are in their rooms. I'm showing an override request at 227. Can you verify the door is secure? Stand by. I monitored the access control screen while I waited. The override request remained pending. No one should have been at that door. No maintenance was scheduled. No authorized staff had requested access. Gregory returned to the radio. I'm at the corridor junction. I have visual on door 227. No one is there. Door is closed and secure. Understood. I'm denying the override request. I selected the deny option on my terminal. The system should have logged the denial and cleared the pending request. Instead, the screen displayed a different message. Override authorized. Door 227 unlocked. I stared at the screen. I hadn't authorized the override. I'd explicitly denied it. I checked the access log. The entry showed, Door 227 override authorized at 0443, authorizing operator badge number 4297. Secondary authorization badge number 7185. My badge number was 4297. I had not authorized the override. Badge number 7185 belonged to Marcus Webb, a patrol officer assigned to the overnight shift. I radioed him immediately. Control to Officer Webb. Did you provide secondary authorization for an override at door 227? Negative, Control. I'm currently on the second floor. Haven't been near Ward C all night. The system is showing your badge number as secondary authorization for an override at 0443. That's not possible. I haven't scanned my badge for any override requests tonight. I contacted my shift supervisor, a former corrections officer named Donald Marsh who managed overnight operations. I explained the situation. An override I didn't authorize logged under my badge number with secondary authorization from an officer who hadn't provided it. Donald arrived at the control station within 8 minutes. He reviewed the access log, checked the system status, and examined the audit trail. Everything showed a properly authorized override following standard protocol. 2 badge numbers, correct timestamp, valid authorization codes. Did the door actually unlock? Donald asked. I checked the door status monitor. Door 227 showed as locked and secure. Despite the log entry indicating an authorized override, the door itself had not unlocked. The system says it authorized the override, but the door didn't respond, I said. Donald radioed Gregory Palmer at Ward C and asked him to physically test the door. Gregory confirmed it was locked and would not open without badge access. System glitch, Donald concluded. The override was logged incorrectly, but the door security wasn't compromised. I'll submit a maintenance request for the IT department to review the access control software. He left to continue his rounds. I documented the incident in my shift log and continued monitoring the control station. At 05:15, another override request appeared at door 227. Same door, same pending authorization alert. I immediately denied the request. The system again displayed override authorized and logged the action under my badge number with secondary authorization from Marcus Webb. I radioed Donald. It happened again. Same door, same false authorization. Donald returned to the control station and witnessed the third occurrence at 05:42. This time, neither of us touched the terminal. The override request appeared, remained pending for approximately 15 seconds, and then changed to authorized without any input. The access log showed the same pattern. My badge number as primary authorization, Marcus Webb's badge number as secondary authorization, proper timestamp, valid codes. "This is a serious system malfunction," Donald said. "I'm going to call the on-call IT supervisor." While we waited for IT to respond, I reviewed the access logs from previous shifts. I searched for any similar incidents, unauthorized overrides, or anomalous authorization patterns. I found them immediately. Over the past 47 days, door 227 had been overridden 33 times during overnight shifts. Every override was logged under badge number 4297, my badge number, with secondary authorization from badge number 7185, Marcus Webb. Every override occurred between 0400 hours and 0600 hours, and every override request was for the same door. I showed the log history to Donald. He reviewed it carefully, then checked the patrol and incident reports from those dates. None of the overrides were documented in any incident reports. No patrol officers had requested access. No maintenance activity was scheduled. No emergencies were recorded. 33 overrides, all authorized under my credentials, all during my shifts with no corresponding documentation or legitimate reason. The IT supervisor, a man named Russell Hayes, arrived at 0620. He examined the access control system, reviewed the logs, and ran diagnostic tests on the software and hardware. After 30 minutes of analysis, he presented his findings. "The system is functioning correctly," Russell said. "There's no malfunction, no software error, no network issue. The overrides were processed normally using valid authorization credentials." "But I didn't authorize them," I said. "The system logs indicate you did." Badge number 4297 entered the authorization code at the control terminal. Badge number 7185 provided secondary confirmation via the mobile authorization app. I didn't enter any authorization codes, and Officer Webb says he didn't provide secondary confirmation. Russell pulled up detailed metadata from the authorization log. Each override included not just badge numbers and timestamps, but also terminal location, IP address, device identifier, and authentication method. According to this data, the primary authorizations originated from this control station terminal, Russell said, gesturing to the computer in front of me. "This specific device at this specific IP address logged into the system using your credentials." "And the secondary authorizations?" Donald asked. "Those originated from a mobile device registered to Officer Webb. Device ID matches his assigned security tablet. Authentication was completed using his personal PIN code." I looked at Marcus Webb's position on the facility map. He was currently on the second floor in the East Wing, nowhere near the control station or Ward C. "Can you tell if the door actually unlocked during any of these overrides?" Donald asked. Russell checked the electromechanical lock status logs. The door received the unlock command each time. The magnetic lock disengaged for 3 minutes before automatically resecuring. Standard override protocol. "So the door was actually unlocked 33 times?" "Yes." Donald sent patrol officers to review surveillance footage from the door 227 area during several of the override timestamps. The footage showed the same thing in every instance. The corridor was empty, no one approached the door, and the door remained closed despite being electronically unlocked. 33 overrides, 33 unlocked intervals. No one entered or exited. Russell suggested a security investigation to determine if my credentials had been compromised. He recommended immediate password reset, badge replacement, and audit of all access control activity associated with my badge number. I completed the security reset that morning. New password, new PIN codes, new badge issued with a different number. Marcus Webb underwent the same process. Our old credentials were deactivated and flagged in the system. I took 2 days off as a precautionary measure while IT conducted a comprehensive security audit. They found no evidence of credential theft, unauthorized access, or system compromise. My account had not been used from any device or location other than the control station during my assigned shifts. Marcus Webb's account showed the same pattern. Only authorized usage from his assigned tablet during legitimate duty periods. The audit concluded that the overrides were processed using valid, non-compromised credentials through proper system channels. No security breach occurred. No unauthorized access was detected. I returned to work on Wednesday night. New badge number 8803. New credentials, new authentication codes. I settled into the control station and began my shift with confidence that whatever system issue had caused the false overrides had been resolved. At 04:38, an override request appeared for door 227. I denied it immediately. The system authorized it anyway, logging the action under my new badge number 8803 with secondary authorization from Marcus Webb's new badge number. Over the following week, the pattern continued. Every shift, multiple override requests for door 227. Every request processed as authorized despite my explicit denials. Every authorization logged under my current credentials. Donald eventually assigned a different officer to the control station to determine if the issue was specific to me or to the control station itself. The new officer, a woman named Rachel Ortiz, worked my shift for 3 nights. No override anomalies occurred. Door 227 remained secure with no unauthorized access requests. On her 4th night, I returned to the control station. The overrides resumed immediately. Rachel suggested we test something. She would operate the control terminal while I left the station entirely. We would see if the overrides still occurred in my absence. I agreed. At 0400 hours, I left the control station and proceeded to the 2nd floor break room. I remained there away from all access control terminals with multiple witnesses confirming my location. At 0440, Rachel radioed me. Override request just came through for door 227. I denied it. Did the system accept the denial? No. It authorized the override, logged under your badge number, secondary authorization from Webb. I was nowhere near the control station. I hadn't touched any terminal, any computer, any device with access to the system. But the override was processed under my credentials as if I'd personally authorized it. Russell Hayes conducted another investigation. He examined every component of the access control system, reviewed authentication protocols, analyzed network traffic, and tested for security vulnerabilities. He found nothing wrong. The system is functioning exactly as designed, he said. It's processing legitimate authorization requests from authenticated users through proper channels. But I'm not making the authorization requests, I said. According to every piece of technical evidence, you are. Donald made a decision. He removed me from control station duties and reassigned me to patrol work. If the overrides were somehow connected to my presence at the control terminal, removing me from that role would resolve the issue. The reassignment took effect immediately. Another officer took over control station operations. I began patrol rounds, checking doors, monitoring corridors, responding to staff requests. Standard security work. 3 nights after my reassignment, I was conducting a patrol on the first floor when I passed the control station. Through the window, I could see the officer on duty, a man named Thomas Wright, working at the terminal. The monitors displayed normal access control status. Everything appeared routine. As I watched, one of the screens changed. An override authorization appeared. Door 227. I saw Thomas lean forward, presumably to deny the request. The screen updated. Override authorized. Thomas immediately grabbed his radio. I heard him call Donald to report an unauthorized override. The response followed the same pattern I'd experienced. The override was logged as properly authorized, dual credentials, valid authentication, no system errors. But this time, the authorization showed different badge numbers, not mine, not Marcus Webb's. Thomas Wright's badge number as primary authorization. The patrol officer providing secondary confirmation was someone I'd never met, assigned to a different shift. I contacted Russell Hayes and described what I'd observed. He reviewed the new override logs and found the same technical patterns: valid credentials, proper authentication, legitimate system processing. "It's not specific to you," Russell said. "It's specific to whoever operates the control station during that time window. The system processes overrides for door 227 using whatever credentials are currently active in the control station, regardless of who actually initiates the request." So the system is authorizing overrides automatically? The system doesn't authorize anything automatically. It processes authorization requests from authenticated users. The requests are coming from somewhere, entered through proper channels using valid credentials. And the system is just doing its job. Then who's making the requests? Russell had no answer. I've been on patrol duty for 6 months now. I check doors, monitor secure areas, and respond to incidents. I never work the control station. But sometimes during my rounds, I pass door 227 in Ward C. The door is always secure, always locked, always closed. But the access logs tell a different story. They show that door being overridden multiple times every night, unlocked for 3-minute intervals, accessed by authorized personnel using proper credentials. The logs document a pattern of regular, legitimate security overrides processed through appropriate channels with full accountability. And no one, not the IT department, not the security supervisors, not the facility administrators, has been able to explain why the overrides happen or who's actually requesting them. All they know is that the system is functioning correctly, following protocols exactly and documenting every action with perfect accuracy. I just don't know who's performing the actions the system is documenting, and I've stopped asking because the answer seems to be whoever the system decides needs to be there, performing the overrides, authorizing the access, even if that person is standing on the other side of the facility insisting they're doing nothing at all. Some authorizations, it seems, don't require authorization. Some doors unlock themselves using credentials that belong to people who never touch the controls. And some systems work perfectly, documenting procedures that no one remembers executing. I carry my badge now, the number 8803, and I wonder whose hands it's in when the system logs my authorization for overrides I never approved. I wonder if there's another version of me somewhere in the system's memory still sitting at that control terminal, still processing requests, still following protocol exactly while I walk these corridors trying to understand why my credentials keep working long after I've left the room. Story 7, the incident review officer listed as involved party. My position at Clearwater Psychiatric Hospital was incident documentation and review. I examined security reports, patient safety events, staff injury claims, and operational irregularities. My job was to verify that incidents were properly documented, identify procedural failures, and recommend corrective actions. I had no direct patient contact and no operational security responsibilities. I worked in a small office on the third floor reviewing reports submitted by security officers, nursing staff, and facility administrators. I'd been in this role for 9 years, processing an average of 40 to 60 incident reports per month. The work required attention to detail, understanding of facility protocols, and the ability to identify inconsistencies in documentation. I was good at it. My reviews were thorough, my recommendations were practical, and my reports consistently met quality assurance standards. The incident that changed everything arrived in my queue on a Thursday morning in early October. Report number 4721, submitted by a night shift security officer named Paul Stevenson. The subject line read, "Physical altercation. Ward D, patient aggression toward staff." I opened the report and began my standard review process: initial assessment, date, time, location, involved parties, incident classification. Everything appeared properly formatted. I proceeded to the narrative section. The report described an altercation between a patient and a security officer during the overnight shift. The patient, agitated and non-compliant, had physically struck the officer during an attempt to redirect the patient back to their room. The officer, following restraint protocol, had implemented physical controls to prevent further violence. The situation was resolved with minimal injury to both parties. The patient received emergency sedation. The officer was treated for minor contusions and released back to duty. Standard incident, properly managed, good documentation. I continued reviewing, checking witness statements and supporting documentation. 3 witness statements were attached. One from the nurse who administered the sedation, one from a second security officer who assisted with the restraint, and one from the patient's assigned psychiatric aide. All 3 statements corroborated the narrative. The incident occurred as described. The response was appropriate. No policy violations were evident. I moved to the involved parties section, where the report listed everyone directly involved in the incident. This section required specific information: names, job titles, badge numbers, and role in the incident. Patient name, redacted for privacy. Primary security officer, badge number 6954, role restraint implementation. Secondary security officer, badge number 3381, was role assistance and witness. Nursing staff, badge number 7723, role medical intervention. Psychiatric aide, badge number 5168, role witness incident review officer, badge number 2479, role involved party. I stopped reading. That last entry made no sense. Incident review officers weren't involved parties. We reviewed incidents after they occurred. We examined documentation, we assessed compliance, we recommended corrections. We didn't participate in the incidents themselves. I checked the badge number, 2479. That was my badge number. I reread the entry. Incident Review Officer, badge number 2479, role, involved party. I hadn't been anywhere near Ward D during the overnight shift. I worked day shifts, Monday through Friday. 0800 hours to 1600 hours. The incident occurred at 02:30 on a Wednesday morning. I was at home, asleep, 40 minutes away from the facility. I checked the report submission date. It had been filed at 06:15, 3 hours and 45 minutes after the incident. Standard timing for overnight incident documentation. The report hadn't been modified or amended since submission. The involved parties list was original content from the initial filing. I called Paul Stevenson, the officer who'd submitted the report. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding tired. He'd just gotten home from his shift. "Paul, this is David Marsh from Incident Review. I'm looking at your report from last night, number 4721. Okay, is there a problem? You listed me as an involved party. There was a pause. I listed who? Me. David Marsh, badge number 2479. You listed me as an involved party in the incident. Another pause, longer. I didn't list you. Why would I list an incident review officer as an involved party? You weren't there. Your report shows my badge number in the involved parties section. That's not possible. I completed that report myself. I didn't include anyone who wasn't present during the incident. I asked him to check his own copy of the report. He put me on hold while he accessed the security database from his home computer. When he returned, his voice had changed, less tired, more confused. Your badge number is there. I'm looking at it right now, but I didn't put it there. Who did? I don't know. I'm the only one who edited this report. It was submitted directly from my terminal with no subsequent modifications. If your badge number is in the document, I must have entered it. But I have no memory of doing that, and no reason why I would. I thanked him and ended the call. I examined the report's metadata, creation date, author, revision history, submission timestamp. Everything indicated Paul Stevenson had created the document, entered all content, and submitted it without any edits or external modifications. But Paul insisted he hadn't listed me as an involved party, and I knew I hadn't been present during the incident. I decided to treat it as a clerical error. Paul had been tired, working the end of an overnight shift, documenting a stressful incident. He'd made a mistake, somehow entering the wrong badge number or selecting my name from a drop-down menu accidentally. I corrected the involved parties list, removing my badge number from the section, and added a reviewer note explaining the administrative correction. I completed the rest of my analysis, found no policy violations, and approved the report for filing. 2 weeks later, another report arrived in my queue. Report number 4813, submitted by a different security officer, a woman named Valerie Curtis. The incident involved a patient found in an unauthorized area during evening shift. The patient had bypassed a secured door and accessed a maintenance corridor. Security responded, returned the patient to the ward, and investigated how the access breach occurred. I reviewed the report systematically. The narrative was clear, the response was appropriate, the investigation was thorough. I moved to the involved parties section. My badge number was listed again. Incident Review Officer, badge number 2479, role, involved party. I called Valerie immediately. She had the same reaction as Paul Stevenson. Confusion, denial, insistence that she hadn't listed me. And when she checked her own copy of the report, she confirmed my badge number was present, even though she had no memory of entering it. I examined the report metadata again. Valerie Curtis was listed as the sole author. No edits, no modifications, no other contributors. The document had been created and submitted by her alone. I contacted my supervisor, a woman named Angela Price, who'd managed the incident review department for 23 years. I showed her both reports and explained the situation. "This is unusual," she said, reviewing the documents carefully. "Two separate incidents. Two different authors, same data entry error. That suggests a systemic issue, possibly a software problem." She contacted the IT department and requested a review of the incident reporting system. A technician examined the database, checked for autofill errors, reviewed form templates, and tested data entry protocols. He found no technical issues. The system was functioning correctly. "User error is the most likely explanation," he concluded. Both officers independently made the same mistake when completing their reports. But over the next 6 weeks, my badge number appeared in 11 more incident reports. Different authors, different incidents, different dates. All listing me as an involved party, all submitted by officers who insisted they hadn't included my information. Angela eventually assigned someone else to review any reports that listed my badge number to avoid the appearance of conflict of interest. She suggested that maybe my information was appearing in reports because I'd been logged into the system while officers were completing their documentation, and some kind of data crossover was occurring. The IT department investigated that theory. They found no evidence of data crossover, session contamination, or system interference. Each report was independently created with unique session IDs and isolated data entry processes. 3 months after the first occurrence, I noticed something else while reviewing a report submitted by a night shift officer named Thomas Wright. The incident involved a patient who'd become combative during a room search. The response required physical restraint and emergency sedation, standard procedure. But the narrative included a detail that caught my attention. Incident Review Officer Marsh assisted with documentation of patient property during the search process. I read the sentence 3 times. I hadn't assisted with any property documentation. I'd never been present during any room search. I didn't work night shifts. I checked the witness statements attached to the report. One was attributed to me. Witness statement provided by David Marsh, badge number 2479, Incident Review Officer. The statement described the room search process, the patient's behavior, and the items documented during the search. It was detailed, procedural, and professional. It sounded exactly like something I would write, but I hadn't written it. I'd never been interviewed as a witness. I'd never provided a statement. I called Thomas Wright. He was certain he'd interviewed me. You were standing right there during the search. I asked you to document the property inventory while we managed the patient. You agreed and took notes. After we cleared the scene, I asked you to submit a formal witness statement. You said you'd email it to me, and you did. I received it 4 hours later and attached it to my report. I wasn't there, Thomas. I worked day shifts. You were there. I spoke to you directly multiple times. You documented the property. You submitted the statement. You helped with the incident resolution. I asked him to describe what I'd been wearing. He described my usual work attire, dark blue slacks, white button-down shirt, facility ID badge on a lanyard. Exactly what I wore to work every day. What time did this incident occur? 02:15. At 02:15 that morning, I'd been at home. My wife could verify it. She'd woken up briefly when I'd gotten up to use the bathroom. We'd spoken. I'd checked the time on my phone, 02:23. I was definitely at home, not at the facility. But Thomas Wright insisted I'd been present, and the witness statement attributed to me was attached to his report, submitted from my facility email address with my digital signature authenticating the document. I checked my email sent folder. The message was there. Sent at 0642, addressed to Thomas Wright. Subject line: Witness Statement Incident 4975. The message body contained the formal statement properly formatted with my name and badge number at the bottom. I hadn't sent that email. I hadn't written that statement. At 0642, I'd been at home getting ready for work. I didn't start my shift until 0800 hours. But the email existed in my sent folder, sent from my account with my authentication credentials. Angela Price arranged for another comprehensive investigation. IT reviewed my email account, examined login records, checked authentication logs, and analyzed system access patterns. They found no evidence of account compromise. All emails sent from my account originated from devices and locations I'd actually used: my office computer, my work laptop, my facility-issued phone. The witness statement email had been sent from my office computer. Login records showed my credentials authenticating at 0638 that morning. I'd accessed my email, drafted the statement, and sent it at 0642, except I hadn't arrived at work until 0753. Badge scan records confirmed I'd entered the facility at that time. Security footage from the parking lot showed my vehicle arriving at 0749. At 0638, when my computer logged me into the system and sent that email, I was driving on Interstate 74, still 12 miles from the facility. The investigation concluded with no definitive explanation. No security breach, no technical malfunction, no evidence of credential theft or unauthorized access. The activity logged under my account appeared to be legitimate usage by an authorized user. Angela removed me from incident review duties and placed me on paid administrative leave while they determined next steps. She was apologetic, professional, and clearly confused by the situation. She emphasized that I wasn't suspected of any wrongdoing, but the documentation irregularities made it impossible for me to continue reviewing incidents that listed me as an involved party. I stayed on leave for 6 weeks. During that time, my badge number appeared in 9 more incident reports. My email account sent 7 witness statements I didn't write. My office computer logged activity during hours when I was provably somewhere else. Angela eventually offered me a different position, something far removed from incident documentation. I declined. I resigned from Clearwater Psychiatric Hospital on a Friday afternoon in late March, effective immediately. But sometimes I access the incident reporting database through the external portal I'm still authorized to use for administrative purposes. I check the reports filed after my resignation. I search for my badge number. It's still appearing, 2 or 3 times per month. Listed as an involved party, providing witness statements, assisting with documentation, present during incidents I couldn't possibly attend because I no longer work there. I'm currently employed at a different facility in a different city, working a similar role in quality assurance and safety review. I haven't told anyone at my new job about what happened at Clearwater. I complete my work, review my assigned reports, and maintain clear boundaries between documentation and involvement. But I've started noticing something. Small inconsistencies in the reports I review. Badge numbers that appear in multiple places simultaneously. Witness statements that sound too detailed, too procedural, too perfect. Authors who insist they didn't write sections that appear under their names. And I wonder if what happened to me at Clearwater is happening here too. If there are versions of us that exist only in documentation, that appear in incident reports and witness statements and involved party lists, performing functions we don't remember, attending incidents we never witnessed, providing testimony we never gave. Maybe that's what incident review really is. Not examining what happened, but discovering what we're documented as having done. And learning that sometimes the official record knows more about our actions than we do. Because somewhere in the system there's a version of me that never left Clearwater, that still responds to incidents and documents property and provides statements even though I resigned months ago. A version that exists in reports and logs and metadata, doing the work I'm no longer there to do. And I'm listed as the reviewer who approved this situation. Badge number 2479. Role, involved party. Story 8. The security guard classified as environmental risk. I worked facility risk assessment at Riverside Psychiatric Hospital for 13 years. My role was to evaluate environmental hazards, review safety protocols, and maintain the institutional risk matrix that guided operational decisions. I didn't provide security services in the traditional sense. I didn't patrol corridors or respond to incidents. I analyzed data, identified patterns, and quantified threats to patient and staff safety. The risk matrix was a comprehensive database that categorized every potential hazard within the facility. Structural issues like loose flooring or faulty wiring, environmental factors like temperature control failures or air quality problems, operational risks like insufficient staffing or equipment malfunctions, and patient-related variables like aggression history or self-harm tendencies. Each risk was assigned a severity score, a probability rating, and a mitigation priority. I updated the matrix quarterly, incorporating incident reports, maintenance records, and staff safety concerns. The system generated risk profiles for every area of the facility, helping administrators allocate resources and implement preventive measures. It was analytical work, focused on systems rather than individuals. In early January, I began the first quarterly update of the year. The process involved reviewing 3 months of incident data, cross-referencing maintenance logs, and recalculating risk scores based on new information. I worked systematically through each category, updating scores, noting trends, documenting changes. I was reviewing the environmental risk section when I noticed an entry I didn't recognize. The category was labeled Personnel Proximity Variables, which typically included risk factors related to staffing patterns, shift coverage, and employee fatigue. But this entry was different. The designation read, Security Personnel, Badge Number 6538, Environmental Interaction Risk. Badge Number 6538 was mine. I was listed as an environmental risk factor. I checked the entry details. Risk severity, moderate. Probability, high. Mitigation recommendation, controlled exposure protocols, access limitation to high-risk wards, continuous monitoring. The entry made no sense. Personnel proximity variables assessed risks posed by insufficient staffing or staff behavior, not individual employees. Security guards weren't classified as environmental risks unless they demonstrated dangerous behavior or policy violations that threatened facility safety. I checked my own personnel file. No disciplinary actions, no safety violations, no complaints or incident reports involving my conduct. My performance reviews were consistently above standard. I'd received commendations for my analytical work and attention to detail. I searched the matrix for similar entries, other security personnel listed as environmental risks. I found none. Only my badge number appeared in that category. I contacted my supervisor, a former hospital administrator named Linda Kowalski, who'd managed risk assessment operations for 18 years. I showed her the entry and asked for clarification. "I don't remember creating that entry," she said, examining the database record. "When was it added?" I checked the metadata. The entry was created 7 months ago during the third quarter update. I'd completed that update myself. According to the system logs, I'd created the entry, assigned the risk scores, and input the mitigation recommendations. "I didn't add this," I said. "I would remember classifying myself as an environmental risk." Linda reviewed the audit trail. The entry showed no modifications since its creation. I was listed as both the creator and the last editor. My credentials authenticated the data entry. My terminal was logged as the source device. "Maybe it was a data entry error," Linda suggested. "You were entering information about environmental variables and accidentally created an entry using your own badge number instead of a correct identifier." I explained that environmental variables didn't use badge numbers. They used location codes, equipment identifiers, or hazard classifications. Badge numbers only appeared in personnel-related risk categories, and those categories assessed staffing levels, not individual employees. Linda agreed it was anomalous. She suggested I delete the entry and document the correction in the quarterly update notes. I attempted to delete it. The system returned an error. "Cannot delete entry, referenced in active risk calculations." I tried again with administrative override credentials. Same error. The entry was locked, classified as essential data that couldn't be removed without comprehensive system recalibration. That's strange, Linda said. Only critical infrastructure risks are locked like that. Structural hazards, life safety systems, emergency equipment, not personnel variables. She contacted IT support. A technician examined the database structure and confirmed that the entry was designated as a core risk variable, protected from deletion or modification. To remove it would require recalculating all dependent risk scores across the entire facility matrix, a process that typically took 4 to 6 weeks and required approval from multiple administrators. Why is my badge number classified as a core risk variable? I asked. The technician reviewed the entry's properties. It's referenced in 47 different risk calculations across 6 facility zones. Removing it would invalidate those calculations and potentially compromise the accuracy of operational risk assessments. What calculations is it referenced in? He pulled up the dependency list. My badge number appeared as a modifier in risk calculations for Ward A, Ward C, Ward D, the secure unit, the administrative wing, and the outpatient services area. In each calculation, my designation as an environmental risk increased the overall risk score for those zones. How is my presence increasing risk scores? I asked. The technician examined the calculation formulas. The system treats your badge number as a proximity variable. When you're logged as present in a specific zone, the baseline environmental risk score increases proportionally. The increase is moderate, 0.5 to 0.7 on the risk scale, but it's consistent across all zones where your presence is recorded. I asked him to show me specific examples. He pulled up the risk profile for Ward C. The baseline environmental risk score was 4.2 out of 10. When my badge scans indicated my presence in Ward C, the score increased to 4.8. When I left the area, the score returned to 4.2. The system is treating me like a hazard, I said, like a structural defect or faulty equipment. Not exactly, the technician clarified. It's treating you like an environmental variable that influences other risk factors. Your presence doesn't create new hazards, but it modifies the probability or severity of existing hazards in ways the system considers significant. Linda asked a logical question. How does the system know when he's present in a specific zone? The technician checked the data sources feeding into the risk calculations. My badge scans were automatically integrated into the matrix through the access control system. Every time I scanned my badge to enter a ward or access a secure area, the timestamp and location were logged in both the access control database and the risk assessment matrix. So the system has been tracking my location and adjusting risk scores based on my movements for 7 months, I asked. Yes. I requested a detailed report of all risk score adjustments associated with my badge number over that period. The technician generated it within minutes. The report was 43 pages long, documenting thousands of risk score modifications across hundreds of location entries. The pattern was consistent. My presence in any area increased environmental risk scores. The increase was always moderate, never dramatic, but it was constant and measurable, and it had been happening since the entry was created 7 months ago. Linda asked the question I'd been avoiding. What specific risks are being increased by your presence? The technician examined the calculation details. Patient aggression probability, staff injury likelihood, equipment malfunction frequency, and incident occurrence rates. In each category, the probability increases when badge number 6538 is present in the zone. I reviewed my incident involvement over the past 7 months. I'd been present during 6 documented incidents. 3 patient aggression events, 2 equipment malfunctions, and 1 staff injury. For someone working in a psychiatric facility, that was statistically normal. I hadn't caused any of those incidents. I'd been present as part of my routine assessment work, observing operations and gathering data. but the risk matrix had documented my presence as a contributing variable in each case, not a cause but a modifier that increased the likelihood of the incident occurring. "This is correlation, not causation," I said. "My presence doesn't increase risk. The system is identifying a pattern that doesn't actually exist." Linda agreed. She instructed the technician to investigate the algorithm that generated the entry in the first place. How had the system decided to classify me as an environmental risk? The investigation took 3 days. The technician, along with a senior database analyst, reviewed the matrix's machine learning components. The system used predictive algorithms that analyzed historical incident data and identified variables correlated with increased risk. The algorithm had detected a statistical pattern. Incidents were more likely to occur in areas where my badge number was logged as present. The correlation was weak, only a 12% increase in incident probability, but it was consistent across multiple zones and incident types. The algorithm had automatically generated the entry and assigned the risk classification based on that pattern. "But I'm a risk assessment officer," I protested. "I'm present during incidents because I document them. I arrive after something happens to gather information. My presence isn't causing the incidents, it's a result of the incidents." The analyst acknowledged the logical flaw. "The algorithm doesn't understand causation, it only recognizes correlation. It detected that your badge scans frequently appeared in proximity to incident timestamps and classified that as a risk variable." Linda decided to override the classification and remove the entry manually, accepting the 4 to 6 week recalibration process as necessary. But when she attempted the override, the system rejected it. The rejection message stated, "Entry cannot be modified. Classification verified through continuous monitoring. Current status, active environmental risk factor." The analyst was confused. "The system is saying the classification has been verified through continuous monitoring, but we don't have continuous monitoring protocols for personnel variables. That function only exists for physical infrastructure." He investigated further and discovered that the risk matrix had been autonomously monitoring my badge scan patterns and incident correlations for the past 7 months, continuously updating its confidence level in the classification. The correlation had strengthened from 12% to 19% over that period. "The system has been learning," the analyst said. "It's been tracking your movements and incident outcomes, refining its assessment and increasing its certainty that you represent an environmental risk variable." "Can we disable the learning function?" Linda asked. "Not without potentially compromising the entire matrix. The machine learning components are integrated throughout the system. Disabling them would degrade the accuracy of all risk assessments." Linda made a decision. She reassigned me to administrative work that didn't require facility access. I would continue my analytical responsibilities from an off-site office, reviewing data remotely and preparing reports without entering patient care areas. This would eliminate my physical presence as a variable in the risk calculations. I accepted the reassignment. For 2 weeks, I worked remotely, accessing the risk matrix through secure network connections, completing my quarterly updates without setting foot in Riverside Psychiatric Hospital. During that period, the risk scores for the zones where I'd previously worked began to change. Ward A's baseline environmental risk increased from 3.9 to 4.4. Ward C increased from 4.2 to 5.1. The secure unit's risk score increased from 6.3 to 7.0. The analyst reviewed the changes and found the cause. The risk matrix had adjusted its calculations to account for my absence. The algorithm had determined that my physical presence had been providing a mitigating effect on other environmental variables. Without me present, those variables were now unmodified, resulting in higher baseline risk scores. The system had reversed its assessment. I wasn't increasing risk through my presence. I was reducing risk, and my absence was allowing baseline risks to elevate. Linda called me to explain. The system now classifies you as a negative environmental risk factor, meaning your presence reduces overall risk scores rather than increasing them. But you're still listed as an environmental variable that requires monitoring. What does that mean practically? I asked. It means the system wants you back in the facility. It's recommending controlled exposure protocols, which in this context means scheduled presence in high-risk zones to provide the mitigating effect the algorithm has identified. I returned to on-site work the following week. My badge scans resumed. The risk scores began to decrease again, returning to their previous baseline levels. And the risk matrix continued monitoring my movements, documenting my presence, calculating the environmental impact of my location within the facility. I still work at Riverside. I still update the risk matrix quarterly. And every quarter, I see my own badge number listed in the environmental risk category designated as a moderate negative risk factor. Mitigation recommendation, continuous presence, and regular zone rotation. I'm no longer bothered by it. I've accepted that the system has classified me as part of the facility's environmental infrastructure, something between a person and a hazard variable, a presence that modifies risk through mechanisms I don't fully understand. Sometimes I wonder if the algorithm is identifying something real, something about how my presence affects the space around me, the patients I observe, the incidents that occur or don't occur when I'm nearby. Maybe risk assessment isn't about measuring hazards. Maybe it's about recognizing that people can become part of the environment they monitor, classified and quantified and optimized like air quality or structural integrity. I scan my badge now and imagine the system recalculating, adjusting probabilities, modifying risk scores based on my location. I walk through Ward C and picture the numbers changing, baseline risks shifting, incident probabilities decreasing by 0.5 or 0.7 because I'm present, because the algorithm has learned that my proximity matters in ways it can measure but never explain. I'm an environmental variable now, monitored continuously, essential to accurate risk calculation, protected from deletion because removing me would require recalibrating the entire system. And maybe that's what I always was. Maybe we all are. Not guards or assessors or staff members, but variables in calculations we can't see, influencing outcomes we don't understand. Measured and tracked and optimized by systems that know us better as data than as people. The risk matrix recommends my continued presence. Controlled exposure, access to high-risk zones, regular rotation, all to maintain optimal environmental conditions. And I comply, because the system knows something I don't, something about who I am when I'm there, what I prevent just by existing in those spaces, what risks decrease simply because my badge number appears in the calculation. I work at Riverside, and Riverside works me into its infrastructure, its risk calculations, its environmental design. I'm part of the facility now. Not an employee, not a person, a controlled variable, monitored, measured, maintained at optimal exposure levels to ensure institutional safety. And every time I scan my badge, the system adjusts, recalculates, confirms that I'm exactly where I need to be, where the algorithm determined I should be, where the risk matrix insists I must remain for the safety of everyone else, because I'm not just assessing the risks anymore. I am one, or I prevent them. The system won't clarify which. It only insists that I stay, that I continue moving through these corridors and zones, providing whatever mitigating effect my presence generates. And I do, because the alternative is leaving and the risk scores indicate that's not recommended.